My name is Daichi Yamagata, Assistant Professor at Osaka University, Japan. I'd like to talk about density peaks clustering. First, I introduce the background of this study. Let's start with the question, what is density peaks clustering, DPC? This is one of density-based clustering. Essentially, it needs only one domain-specific parameter, but it is robust to different density distributions and not clearly separated clusters in a dataset. Thanks to this nice advantage, DPC has applications in many domains such as neuroscience, graphics, and computer vision. Let's compare the clustering results of DBSCAN and DPC on dataset S2, which has 15 Gaussian clusters. You can see that the clusters are not clearly separated, so DBSCAN does not function well. On the other hand, DPC provides an intuitive result. This is one merit of DPC. Even if a border between clusters is ambiguous, DPC can successfully deal with it, as shown in the right figure. Now we have a question, why DPC can form such clusters? Let's see the definition of DPC. Here, assume that we have n d-dimensional points. DPC forms clusters based on two criteria, local density and dependent distance. The local density of Pi is the number of other points with distance less than dcat. Dcat is a domain-specific distance threshold. The dependent point of Pi is the nearest neighbor among points with higher local density than its local density rho I. The dependent distance of Pi is the distance between Pi and its dependent point. The pair of local density and dependent distance can be viewed in a two-dimensional space called a Dead-Zone graph. From this figure, we can see that 15 points have large dependent distance. If a point has large dependent distance, it means that there are no points with higher local density in that local space. So this point is density peak. Density peaks are regarded as cluster centers. They can be decided by setting delta mean. Besides, we can remove noises that have small local densities by setting low mean. Then a cluster in DPC is a tree structure rooted at its cluster center, and the parent of each point is its dependent point. The cluster definition of DPC is simple and intuitive, but it has a computational challenge. A straightforward implementation of DPC is to compute the local density and dependent distance of each point by linear scans. This needs quadratic time to the data size, so does not scale well to large datasets. Now we have two questions. Can we break the quadratic time? And can we exploit CPU cores to reduce practical computation time while breaking the quadratic time? In this study, we answer these questions under the assumption of low-dimensional Euclidean spaces. This is a summary of our result. We propose one exact algorithm and two approximation algorithms. They need sub-quadratic time to the data size. Our exact algorithm has partial parallelizability, and our approximation algorithms have almost full parallelizability. So let's turn our attention into the techniques that achieve DPC in sub-quadratic time. I first introduce our exact algorithm EXDPC. Our idea is simple, exploiting a KD tree. Let's see the definition of local density gain. It corresponds to the size of range search, where query is each point and radius is dcat. We use a property of KD tree. A range search on a KD tree needs sublinear time to the data size. Then our algorithm is super simple. Run a range search on the KD tree for each point. This time is sub-quadratic time. Clearly, this algorithm is easy to parallelize. Next, dependent point computation. Dependent point is not simple nearest neighbor, and it has a constraint of local density. So how to find it exactly in sublinear time for each point? Let's assume that the dataset is sorted in descending order of local density. In this figure, P1 has the largest local density and PM has the lowest. Now we want to compute the dependent point of Pi. We see that P1 to Pi-1 have larger local densities than rho I. So the dependent point of Pi exists in this subset. If this subset is indexed by a KD tree, we can find its dependent point by running nearest neighbor search on this KD tree. After that, if Pi is inserted into the KD tree, it is ready for computing the dependent point of Pi plus 1. This is our algorithm that breaks the quadratic time. However, this approach cannot be parallelized because the KD tree is updated incrementally. Next, our first approximation algorithm, ApproxDPC. This algorithm computes the local density of each point exactly, but in an optimized way. The idea is to run range search jointly for cross points. It is easy to imagine that EXDPC traverses almost the same nodes of the KD tree for cross points, and it is redundant. Let's see the left figure and assume the range search of the red circle. The circle centered at P1 or P2 is covered by the red circle. So to obtain the local density of P1 and P2, we need to access only the range search result of the red circle. This grid structure can reduce the number of range searches on the KD tree, and it is no more n times. The theoretical time of this approach is sensitive to the output size of the range search with the extended radius. But if we put a reasonable assumption, this approach improves the time of local density computation against that of EXDPC. Recall that EXDPC cannot parallelize its dependent point computation. Our challenge here is how to parallelize it while keeping sub-quadratic time. Our first idea here is that for each point Pi, if it has a cross point with higher local density, it can be its dependent point, even if it is not nearest neighbor. The cross points are decided based on dcat. Now, what this idea brings? What does this idea bring? For many points, their approximate dependent points can be obtained in constant time. Actually, this data structure maintains the point P star. with the maximum local density in this cell. Then, approximate dependent points of the other points in this cell are P star. For instance, an approximate dependent point of P2 is P1, and this computation is done in a constant time. Moreover, each cell maintains the minimum local density in this cell, and a set of cells to which points not in this cell satisfying distance less than d cut belong. For P star, if there exists a cell whose minimum local density is higher than the local density of P star, its dependent point can be obtained in a constant time. For instance, the minimum local density in C5 is higher than the local density of P1. In this case, approximate dependent point of P1 is the P star of C5. We now have a new question for points with no dependent point. From these operations, what we have to do? This is the remaining task. We solve this question by dividing the sorted dataset into disjoint subsets. Given a point, a subset P1 has one of three cases. Case 1, all points in this subset have higher local density. Case 2, higher local density or not higher. Case 3, all smaller. Now, let's assume that each subset is indexed by a KT tree, as shown in this figure. And we want to compute the dependent point of Pi. The local density of Pi is here. The local densities of points in this subset are all smaller than rho I, so we can ignore them. For Ps-1, we compute the nearest neighbor with higher local density than rho I by linear scan, because this subset falls into case 2. For Ps1, all points have higher local density than rho I, so we compute its nearest neighbor by its KT tree. By merging the results of case 1 and case 2, we can obtain its dependent point exactly. By carefully setting the number of subsets, we have three merits. This algorithm needs sub-quadratic time. This algorithm is parallelizable because each evaluation, the evaluation for each point, is done independently. And this algorithm provides the same cluster centers as those of EXDPC, exact algorithm. This property provides an accurate clustering result. Our second approximation algorithm, S-approx-DPC, further improves the efficiency by converting point clustering to cell clustering. From the grid structure, it is easy to see that points in the same cell have similar local densities and similar dependent points. From this observation, even if we use only one sample point in each cell, the clustering result does not change much. Dependent points of not sampled points add sampled point in the same cell. Then we need to compute the local density and dependent point only for sampled points. For local density computation, the approach of EXDPC is fine. For dependent point computation, the approach of approx-DPC is fine. The time complexity of S-approx-DPC is related to the grid size and data size. The grid size is adjustable by borrowing a parameter epsilon. In practice, the data distribution does not change much even if the data size increases, meaning that the grid size can be regarded as a constant. Then its time complexity is almost linear to the data size. This is the main result of S-approx DPC. Last, I introduce our experimental results. We confirm the accuracy of approximation algorithms by visualization. This dataset has 13 density peaks, so it has 13 clusters. This is exact answer, and this result is from LSHDDP, state-of-the-art approximation algorithm. It has one big difference and it has a small difference. On the other hand, approx DPC and S-approx DPC with small epsilon provide the perfect result. Even if we enlarge epsilon, S-approx DPC provides only a small error. Next, round index on real datasets. Again, approx DPC provides almost perfect result. The bottom table shows the trade-off between time and accuracy of S-approx DPC. When epsilon is small, the result is almost perfect, but long time. When epsilon is large, its round index decreases a bit, but short time. Last, running time. The left figures show the scalability to data size. The right figures show the scalability to the number of threads. The blue lines show our results, the results of our algorithms. EXDPC is quite faster than existing exact algorithms, SCAN and CFS FDPA. Also, approx DPC and S-approx DPC are faster than LSHDDP and scale well to many threads. To conclude, we propose new solutions for density peaks clustering in the Euclidean spaces. We analyze their performances theoretically and empirically, and they are better than those of existing solutions. That's all. Thank you for kind listening.